Subscribe to the Prepper Historian right now, because what we're about to cover is one of those forgotten technologies that completely changes how you look at medieval craftsmanship and long-term survival knowledge. This is not a novelty trick or a romanticized myth. It is a real, documented woodworking method that allowed medieval builders to create planks stronger, flatter and more durable than untreated timber, using nothing but wood, stone, rope, patience and physics. If you care about historical accuracy, resilient construction, or skills that work without electricity, this technique deserves your full attention. Before we get technical, let me hook you properly. Medieval Europe did not have industrial sawmills, hydraulic presses, or kiln-dried lumber. Yet bridges stood for centuries, ship hulls survived brutal seas, and doors resisted war, weather and rot. That durability did not come from luck or superior trees alone. It came from controlled pressure applied over time. The medieval wood press was not about speed. It was about forcing wood fibres to behave, compressing them while green, and locking strength into the plank permanently. Modern builders abandon this because it takes time. Medieval builders embraced it because time was cheaper than replacement. Why medieval craftsmen needed to strengthen planks without modern tools? Medieval carpenters worked with green wood far more often than modern builders realize. Trees were felled locally, sawn quickly and shaped before drying fully, because green wood cuts cleaner and bends more predictably. The problem is that green planks warp, twist, cup and split as they dry. Medieval presses solved this problem by restraining the wood during its most unstable phase. By applying sustained pressure while moisture slowly escaped, the wood fibres dried in alignment instead of fighting each other. The result was lumber that behaved as if it had been kiln stabilized without heat or machines. This mattered for doors, shields, chests, carts, floorboards, siege equipment and ship components. A warped plank could mean a leaking hull or a failed axle. Pressing was not optional in high-stakes construction. It was part of quality control. How the medieval wood press was built using common materials. A medieval wood press was brutally simple. Two thick beams or stone slabs formed the top and bottom. Between them, freshly sawn planks were stacked with spacers to allow airflow. Pressure was applied using wooden screw presses, wedge systems, or weighted stones suspended by ropes. Monastic workshops favoured screw presses carved from oak or beech, while rural builders used wedges driven gradually tighter over weeks. The key detail serious historians often miss is that pressure was not extreme. Crushing the wood would destroy fibres. The pressure was firm, constant, and adjusted slowly. Every few days, wedges were tapped further or screws turned a fraction. This gradual increase allowed internal moisture to migrate outward without creating internal stress fractures. What actually happens inside the wood during pressing? Wood fibres are bundles of cellulose tubes. When green, those tubes are swollen with water. Left unchecked, uneven drying causes them to shrink at different rates, leading to warping. Pressing forces those fibres to dry under restraint, collapsing slightly but uniformly. This densifies the plank, increasing hardness and resistance to impact. Archaeological analysis of medieval planks shows tighter grain spacing and reduced internal voids compared to air-dried wood. This is why medieval doors feel unnaturally heavy for their size and why pressed planks resist splitting along the grain. The press was not just flattening wood, it was restructuring it. Now, you see, this whole process took quite a long time, and, well, patience was absolutely essential. Pressing wood wasn't something you could just finish over a weekend. Depending on how thick the planks were, they'd stay under pressure for several weeks, sometimes even several months. Builders would check the moisture by both weight and, interestingly enough, by sound, tapping the plank and listening for a dull ring, which meant it was drying nicely rather than a wet thud, which well meant it needed more time, If you rushed the process, you'd end up ruining the wood, plain and simple. In fact, medieval guild regulations actually fined craftsmen who took planks out too soon, because those failures didn't just damage reputations, they could endanger lives. And, you know, this kind of patience, that's really why the technique disappeared. Industrial schedules just don't allow for months of stabilization. Medieval builders, though, they planned years ahead. Quite remarkable, really. So, where did all this effort go? Well, this technique found its way into ships, armour, and even architecture. Shipbuilders pressed planks for hulls and decks, which, you know, dramatically reduce seam gaps. Shield makers would press layered boards before gluing and covering them with leather, making them much more resistant to sword blows. And in architecture, pressed planks were used for doors, shutters and flooring, places where otherwise seasonal movement would just destroy the joints. It's a testament to the ingenuity of those old craftsmen, really. One surviving example comes from Scandinavian stave churches, where, you know, pressed planks remain straight after 800 years in harsh climates. That is not accidental craftsmanship. That is controlled compression. So, how can modern survivalists and historians actually apply this today? Well, you can, you know, replicate this technique even now, and you don't need power tools at all. Simply fell or purchase some green lumber, then stack your planks between flat beams. After that, apply pressure using threaded rods, heavy weights or wedge systems, whatever you have at hand. Just make sure to keep the stack sheltered, but, importantly, well ventilated. Now, you want to increase the pressure gradually over several weeks, and, you should monitor the weight loss to judge how well the wood is drying. For preppers, this method gives you stronger lumber for things like cabins, sheds, carts and furniture, and all of it without needing electricity. For historians, it's a way to practice experimental archaeology, which really helps explain why so many medieval structures have lasted so long. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about practical resilience. So, why does this knowledge still matter? Well, the medieval wood press actually teaches us a much larger lesson. You see, strength doesn't always come from brute force. More often, it comes from time, restraint, and a real understanding of materials when they're at their most vulnerable stage. In a world that's frankly obsessed with speed, this technique is a reminder of why older structures tend to outlast the new ones. If you found any value here, do consider subscribing to The Prepper Historian. Share this with someone who still thinks medieval builders were, you know, primitive, and help keep these skills alive. After all, history only survives when it's practiced. not just admired.